friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Garden of Mutual Delights. My guest today is Kellie Turner, who is one of my favorite people to play music with. And as well as that, she's a great actor and a minister. I'm really excited to have her on the show today. The whole point of the Garden of Mutual Delights is so people have a chance to talk about what they're passionate about and what lights them up. Because what better way to share joy than the joy that's already in front of us? So without further ado, my dear friend, Kellie Turner.
Thank you, Jeremy. I am just honored to be with you on today, and just glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, right on. It feels like it's been forever since we've actually had a chance to catch up or play music or any of the stuff that we're used to doing. So
I miss you.
I miss you too. I think we're getting close though. I mean, I get my second vaccine shot a week from today. Actually, a week from today, I'll be well, fully inoculated, but not fully like operational. I'll have another 2 weeks, but hopefully I got
my second one last week.
Okay, cool. So you'll get there ahead of me, which is very cool. That means we'll hopefully get a chance to play some music soon.
Which is different because you're normally early, and I'm normally the one like, yeah, I'm coming.
I was hoping I would get vaccinated a lot faster, and when I got out to Texas for the run of Sherwood Forest Fair, there were all these programs, and a bunch of the other performers got vaccinated the week before, and the week I showed up was the week that everything opened up to everybody 16 and over, so it was a lot harder to get appointments, even sitting there and hitting refresh and expanding like to which HEB I wanted to go to.
I hear you. So,
yeah,
but soon,
and it'll be good to get the band back together, even in
I know.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about music first and foremost, because that's one of our biggest points of engagement. So like how did you get started in music? Like I'm always interested to hear how people kind of like found their way, not just to music generally, but to the instrument that like was really like their real instrument.
Well, I have an aunt to thank for that. When I was 6, she purchased this little organ. It was like small little keyboard that had like the push buttons where you push the button in the chord and you play the notes. And she got me this for Christmas, and I remember being in my room just playing around with it, and I just I just took to it naturally, and grew up in church, and we would have this they call it Baptist Training Union, but it's sort of like Sunday school, but kind of in the evening on a Sunday evening. And so in it they would have this where you would do your talent. They would feature, if you have any talent, do your talent, do the thing that you think you're talented at. And so as when I was a kid, my mom said, okay, you really like doing this, so we're going to take your little organ and put it up there, and you can just, play something, because it was fun for me. And so I started doing that, and, just started listening to different things, again, as a kid, and just, it was fun. And so that's how I started. So when my aunt got me that small little keyboard toy organ thing, I started playing with it.
So how old were you at that time?
I was around 6.
Okay. So how long was it between 6 and when you were like playing in church? Like
I started playing in church as a and again the instrument that I gravitated to first. Normally people would go to piano. I went to the organ first. Hammond organ. Let me be specific.
No, that's important. That's important.
Yeah, that's very important to the Hammond organ.
Yes.
The organ that was very very much deeply rooted in my in my context, in my theological context. And so I gravitated.
Which was what? Because not everybody who's watching the show is necessarily going to be able to assume anything.
Sure. Thank you for that. I grew up Baptist down in Texas, and so Hammond organs. There were churches. There were African American churches that had pipe organs, of course, but the majority of them had Hammond organs, and so I grew up playing a Hammond organ, and just did not know all of the intricate details behind how it happened, how the sound came. I didn't know any of the technical part of it. I just knew that I liked sitting at it and playing it. So between that and I started playing for church when I think maybe either like before I became a teenager or right at the point of becoming a teenager, because it was a small African American church, Baptist church in Dallas, and that was just one of the things that if we were always looking for musical people. I mean, singers, and all of that was embraced as a kid when I think about it. So I grew up playing for church when I was preteens or early teens, and my mother before she passed, she would always tell me, when you played, your feet couldn't even touch the pedals. You would just sit up there and just play. So that had to be around preteen when I started playing. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. No, that was great. So when you started playing, were you just exploring on your own, or did you get any kind of like instruction or lessons, or like how much is like your own personal discovery and how much was like a product of like guidance?
I started playing a lot of which is what I heard, and so I started playing by ear before I started getting formal training. I think part of it was that my mother wanted to make sure, like, okay, are you really serious about this before I go into trying to work to try to pay for lessons. So I started taking lessons when I was a teenager. I started taking I took organ lessons, not piano lessons. Right. Again, very specific. So I started taking organ lessons, and the thing is, by the time that I started taking organ lessons, my ear had already developed, and so taking lessons was very challenging for me, because it meant a certain type of discipline that I had not been accustomed to. I hadn't been accustomed to, you got to practice your scales, you got to practice. And so what was fun to me was like, okay, well, this is not fun anymore. Right. My mom said, okay, no, you're gonna stay with it, and so I did. But by that time, I also got really, really interested in acting and in performing, and so that sort of kind of took off as a teenager. And so she just sort of said, okay, well, you already play, and for where you are right now, playing in church, I was fine, because I just learned everything by ear, and so she was not really, because I grew up in a single parent household, and so she wasn't really in a position to financially to kind of support all of these things, paying for organ lessons, paying for these lessons, that lessons, dance lessons, all, but she did her best to try to say, okay, what do you focused on? What do I need to make the sacrifice for, so that you can be the best that you can be? And for that, absolutely honor and appreciative. So I say that to say, when I started playing for church, that was like the first job I had. That was the first. I was bringing in my own allowance. And so, um, being able to do that, she didn't she didn't really push up on me to like my lessons. In hindsight, I wish that she had, um, just so that I wouldn't have such uh, a phobia. I'm a phobia about because I mean I do read. I think that I know more than I give myself credit for knowing, just from looking at stuff and studying stuff. But I by that time, I really I love music. I had a church job and I love theater. So they started to walk together in my teens. Those
Okay.
two art forms.
So just so everybody knows, Kelly and I have played together like a lot over the last few years, and one of the things that's always impressed me about Kelly is she has an incredible ear. And like one of the main gigs that we had was we were kind of like the house worship band for Bethany Children's Home for almost 3 years.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
like most of that time, we wouldn't even know what we were planning on playing until we literally got in the building. And then we'd have, what, an hour and a half or two
Hmm.
hours at most turnaround
At the most 2 hours.
to like
Less than that,
often,
actually.
yeah, often to learn like the whole set. And like that had very little to do with me. That was mostly Kelly like figuring out like all the chords and like what we needed to do to sound good. And I mean, it was always cool to see how quickly Kelly could figure stuff out. I mean, the first time I saw you play was actually on a Hammond, when
Mm-hmm.
we were in seminary together.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, it was during one of the nights of like the spring revival.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Kelly came in and sat down, and at the time, like four of our friends were singing a cappella, and Kelly sat right down, and she knew exactly what key, and she sat down at the Hammond, and that was like, okay. She just sat down and figured out exactly where she needed to be. All right,
It's
that's
fun.
really cool. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah, it's always been like, an aspiration of mine to get my ear anywhere close to where yours is. Which,
Mm.
yeah, like the chords that Kelly picks are just harmonically incredibly beautiful, and like
Uh,
I've always appreciated your harmonic choices.
well, thank you.
Yeah,
And thank you for and I've said this to you before. Thank you for journeying on the path of the unknown. And here we the musical, like I don't know what it is it's gonna be, but we're gonna flow with it.
no, it was
So
great.
that's
It
yeah.
actually got, by the time I switched to bass, when like we added James and Daniel or Corey, that was it was so much more easy at that
Mm,
point, because I it felt like with bass I had more that I could contribute more easily than like what was available to me on guitar. And like
mm,
our friend James Ruhalski is going to be on this show hopefully in the next few weeks, but he's another one that's got an incredible ear, like
yeah.
right
He's
from the
amazing.
ear to his hands on a
Hmm.
guitar, which is, anyway. Um, yeah,
He's amazing.
he is.
Hi, Jimmy, wherever you are.
Well, he's on Twitch, so like hopefully he'll get to see this at some point. Um, anyway, I'm hoping to catch up with him really soon.
Yes, yes, yes.
But kind of backing up a little bit, you were talking about how right around the time that you started playing in church,
Hmm.
like you really got hit by like the theater and the acting bug. Like what? How did that discovery come about?
Well, the theater bug has always been there. It was actually there earlier, actually before probably before music, and I think it just really I watched a lot of television as a child. Good, bad, or indifferent. I did. It was my escape. It was in one way as escape from what, but just being being an introvert, um, and I guess being a bit of a daydreamer, um, and wanting to, be. I've always been a creator in wanting to create stuff and make stuff and and hear stories. Maybe not be the center of attention in telling the stories, but to really watch and experience a great story. And all of that for me came through watching old movies.
So what were
And
what were some of those movies that like you really loved as a kid?
I loved and probably still do all of the road pictures. Bob Hope, Bing Crosby. The music, the Hollywood of with musicals and things like that. So, but Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, Jimmy Stewart, Fred Astaire. Um, but I really I loved that. I loved the glamour of it. I loved just watching the stories. I mean, I'm older now, and now I look at them uh, through a different lens.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about that a little bit later. But I still watching them now is just reminiscent of my childhood, and so I enjoy them because it reminds me of oh wow, I used to do this as a child.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
So
Did
what?
that answer your question?
Yeah. What TV were you watching?
Um, Westerns
Okay. So like the Rifleman and
like a Big Valley,
okay.
um, uh, Wagon Train, um, because on Saturday, I would watch Wagon Train because for me it allowed me to play make believe, um, and so I would get my tin pan and my tin cup, and I'd ask my mom to buy me a can of chili so that I could camp out like the cowboys. Um, this is just really weird, but so I would camp out in the den and on a Saturday and just watch westerns all day, and that was fun because I didn't the street that I grew up on there were not there weren't any kids on my street to play with. And the next door neighbors they were older boys. The Fullers they had sons, so they were older boys, and so couldn't play with them. So there were not really any kids on my street, so I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
So TV, there it is.
Right on. So so your imagination is lit up by all these ideas and like what was like how did you finally start getting into actually acting? Like where did the transition happen from like watching and like kind of like engaging in the daydreaming and like the
Hmm.
imaginative part of it, and when did that make a shift to being part of the
Hmm.
storytelling?
Well, here is my championing the world of education, um, because and it's a world in which to champion. Um, because I went to my mom put me in uh, performing arts schools or talented and gifted or magnet programs. She put me in those, and so uh, the local PBS station they were casting some stuff in this, so they came to the school and I auditioned, and so I was able to be a part of movies, and PBS stuff as a kid, and being a part of performing arts programs as a kid allowed me to really uh, be in those arenas and it nurtured that for me, and it was amazing. And so I mean, I went to, I think starting in the sixth grade. Yeah, starting in the sixth grade, I started going to a program for talented and gifted kids, and then um, I went to a performing arts high school, and so it's just always been a part of me.
Yeah. Do you remember? Were there any experiences during that time that really stick out to you? Like this is really what I want to do. Like this is, or or what? Or was the experience different?
Um, I think, well, I think, if my mom were here, she'd probably say, "Oh, you've been doing it for years, long before that," because she would always put me, like, for the church Christmas program or the Easter program, where kids have to do their Easter speeches and all of those, in the Christmas play. I was in all of that stuff because at the time she was over, even before that, but she also took on the position of being over the youth department at our church, and so she we would do these productions at church, and so I was actually kind of doing it long before I was a teen,
Mm-hmm.
with just, with my Easter speech, getting up in front of people, and if I look at it now, it's like getting up and doing my monologue.
Right.
Um, so I had to memorize stuff as a kid, and my mom would, oh no, give her, oh that's too short, give her something really long, and I'm like, lady, are you serious? Um,
So you had
yeah,
already
so
had the experience of like feeling like this is what I was meant to do, like even before.
absolutely, absolutely. I remember, I remember, the same aunt that had purchased the organ for me. She was really, I think she had pneumonia. She was ill. She was sick. Whatever, she was sick at the time, and we'd gone to visit her in her home, and my mother said, "Okay, well, go on in there. She's sick. You've always said you wanted to be a doctor. You want to play a doctor. You want to play a doctor. Go in there. She's sick." And so I said, "No, no, I didn't mean for real. I mean, I just want to play. Like a make believe doctor, not a real doctor. I can't." So, and there's the laughter. They thought that was quite hilarious, but just at the time I did not. But yeah, so I've always wanted to teasing a child, but yeah. So I've always wanted, and I guess known that was my thing.
It's kind of interesting when you were telling the story about like wanting to pretend to be a doctor. I'm thinking
Hmm.
about one of the most recent roles that I've seen you in. So
Yeah,
for those of you who, if Kelly looks familiar to you and you haven't met before and you watched Modern Love on, that's Amazon Prime, right?
that is correct.
If you've watched Modern Love on Amazon Prime, Kelly had a part, and you're a midwife in that, right?
That is correct.
And it's
That
actually a
was
really
fun.
it's a really charming story. Do you want to talk about that experience a little bit?
The experience of being on set, or the experience of the that particular episode.
Any of it?
Well, I'll speak to being on set. Man, it was so much fun. I felt at home.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to be in a dressing room, and be in makeup, and um, being on set, and being directed, and I want more of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, we may get into, well, then why aren't you doing more of that? Um,
Well, okay. So I think one of the things that I love about that show and that episode in particular is like the show's trying to depict some aspects of love that we might not always talk about but are really important. And like the episode itself, even with the primary characters, is gorgeous, but I think one of the things that I really think about watching that episode is your actual part is fairly short, but like
Mm-hmm.
even your character has like a lot of warmth, and like she's really important to that moment. I mean,
Mm. You're very kind.
well,
Thank you.
I mean, the thing about like a really good piece is like all the parts really matter, like even if they're small, and like the
Mm-hmm.
things that they do and they function as like I think it's there's some really cool moments by the time you've already shown up in the episode, but the
Mm-hmm.
episode like you're showing up at like the probably most pivotal moment of that episode, which
Yeah. Yeah. Um. It. Yes, you're right. I hadn't thought about it like that, but yes. Um. I will just reiterate that it was fun being on set, and it was fun to do that. I would love to do more of that.
mm-hmm.
Uh, and most artists will tell you that they have their thing that they're passionate about, and then they have their thing. There's several passions, and I think that at this stage of where I am presently, I am honoring the dual calls. How about that? And I believe that the universe will honor me being obedient in that regard. I'm certainly hoping so.
Well, okay, so speaking of calls, it's
Aha!
it's interesting thinking about the way that our passions intersect
Mm-hmm.
and the way that that can often manifest in some really unique ways. So Kelly and I met in seminary,
Mm-hmm.
and I've gotten to work with Kelly in a couple of church settings, which I wouldn't call necessarily like the most traditional, but I think it's always been really a rich experience getting to work with you to create a worship service, because there's on one hand like the music is always beautiful and really well thought out and really carefully not only planned but performed, and then there's also something about like a way of presenting not just the music but all of kind of the liturgical movements of the service in a
Mm-hmm.
way that the pacing is really carefully considered. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a, the church doesn't necessarily get like the best reputation these days because it often seems to get in the news because it's on the wrong side of
Mm-hmm.
like a justice issue, or it's not doing enough to deal with inequality, like, or it's just talking about fixing it but it's not actually doing anything about it. And I think it's always been a great thing to see how the ways in which you're doing ministry is specifically geared toward like really reaching people who need it. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I loved about Bethany Children's Home was a lot of those kids have gone through a lot of trauma, and like I felt really good about the fact that we were showing up as caring adults, and like some people don't, I think, put enough they don't give enough respect to how music really can transform people. But
Mm-hmm.
like there's this idea of like performing really well and picking certain things as like an act of as like an act of grace and an act of hospitality, and I've always appreciated the way that always shines through in the way that you do ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So
Thank you.
on that note, can you talk a little bit about like how that call and that particular passion has manifested for you?
Yeah. I fought it tooth and nail because this is I didn't in on one hand I didn't want to be thought of as, oh, well, you can't really do this sort of ministry and you know do acting, because then you're not really you're not real, it's not real. This authenticity, this
So
this
who's telling you that it wasn't real? Was it like the artists or was it the ministers?
well, now both. How about that? um I remember I remember in the church that I grew up in, one of the ladies of the church, she said to me, um, basically that my whole idea with wanting to be an artist outside of the church, that God would not be pleased with that, and that I needed to give that up and just be in the church, and that was very sad to me, because I know that I've been called to do things beyond that, and in the world of being an artist, and this is probably my own stuff, I didn't want to be perceived as being the uncool person. The person was, you better not say or do that, because she's in seminary or she's in ministry. I didn't want to be the uncool. I didn't want to be that person. I wanted to feel like I wanted to be taken seriously as a person that could play different roles, and be an artist, be an actress, because that's that's part of my training. That's and then I didn't want people in church to go, oh, you're an actor, so you're going to tell me about the Bible, and you're not, so so it's a, yeah, so on both sides, on both sides, which is why I've just really started referring to myself as an artist, because for me that rings true on both sides, and it rings for me, it rings true. You say we went to seminary together. To me, it rings true when speaking about the Creator, or when I refer to uh, my higher power, um, as the Creator, because the Creator created, and that crosses all boundaries, or all that checks all the boxes for me.
Mm-hmm. So so what was it that finally broke down those reservations? Because I mean, the ministry that you're involved in, it does cross a lot of boundaries, and it is trying to reach like a lot of people that the church has not historically treated well.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little about that?
Which part?
Okay, so
Well, I
like
mean, well,
core.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, well, no, no, I mean, I think that was a fair question. In that, um, I serve a couple of congregations, and as you know, this us even being able to have this time together is just a feat in and of itself. Um, but my spouse started a church, and so being a part of um, a fellowship, or the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, based in Oakland. We are walking the path, we're walking the journey of inclusivity and what that looks like. So,
So for those folks that are watching at home that don't know what TFAM is, can you like
mhm,
clue them in about what that is? Because not everybody that's tuning in is necessarily like clued into all the latest like seminary conversations.
sure, sure. Let me see if I can do this. Um, TFAM, Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. It's a movement that speaks about the radical, inclusive love of Christ for all people, particularly those who are LGBTQI questioning. Um, I think I got all the letters. Uh, wherever you may be, um, God, there's a place at the table,
Yeah.
and so yeah, and yeah, is that enough?
I mean, that's a good start. I mean, I'm not I'm trying to make sure that people who are watching this and listening to this are hearing something that I think is really important about about this whole idea that there are Christians in the world that are for LGBTQ folk, like, and there's not enough of that in the press,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, and there's not enough in the press about how so many of us, myself included, are looking at the Bible in a way that is more about creating a more equitable and just world,
Mm-hmm.
like on a very basic primal level, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
what seems to be what a lot of the press tends to be, which unfortunately seems to often come from like more conservative parts of the church that I don't know are doing a great job of celebrating like the love of Jesus.
Yeah, and yeah, and what's even more interesting is that it seemingly those congregations are larger, so that's very troubling to me.
Well, yeah. And I think part of the reason why I wanted to have a conversation about TFAM and also core is this idea of like who were these who were these groups created for? Like this was created for people who came up in like often more conservative contexts that are
Mm-hmm.
used to a certain style of worship and music, and because of the identity that they were born with, like that is somewhat closed to them. And like
Mm-hmm.
TFAM was created to make a safe place to land for
Mm-hmm.
people who still
Mm-hmm.
had religious feelings and still had like a deep spiritual need to be part of a worshiping community, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
also they needed to be themselves and they needed to be loved and accepted and affirmed for who they are in their fullness. And I think that's an incredibly beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is, and I cannot wait for. I was just speaking to someone about this morning. I cannot wait until. I mean, we've met via Zoom and all of that, but I can't wait for us to safely gather again. And when I say safely gather, like safely gather, yes, but to be in a room and not necessarily have to be 6 feet away from, because I have missed that, and I've missed uh, the ways in which we worship, which tends to be a little bit more Pentecostal in its flair.
Mm-hmm.
Baptist Method, Baptist Method, Pentecostal. It's a hodgepodge of things because everybody's coming from different experiences. Um, and at a TFAM convocation, there's an element of when I say pomp and circumstance, I mean that not in a negative way, but there's we know what it means to process in with a hymn, or and and then know all of the verses to the hymn, and then you know later on in the worship experience, may break out in a full Pentecostal run. I miss that,
Mm-hmm.
because that's even though I was raised Baptist, uh, that is the worship style that I feel most at home with, and to have that space for those that have been thrown out of the church, those that have been hurt by the church, those that have been attacked those that have been just ostracized and marginalized. That's the word. To have that space, it is it's refreshing.
Yes, it is. And it's a beautiful thing to be in that place when that's going on. I've always been really blessed by the rich experience of being around for like any of the core services that I've been
Mm.
present for anytime that TFAM has gotten together.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it's fun.
it is.
And I wish I had a broader vocabulary than that, but that's what I'm working with today.
That's all right.
Fun.
So if people would want to maybe check out core, like what could
Mhm.
people maybe do?
Um, like us on Facebook, Core Fellowship Lancaster. Um, and we're still zooming every Saturday at 1 Eastern, and yeah, we're still doing that. We're still meeting online virtually and kind of um, building that out. Um, but yeah, Facebook and Zoom,
Beautiful.
Zoom.
Well, Kellie, thanks so much for stopping in and talking to us today. We'll have you back because I hear you're going to be launching a new website kind of soon, and we'll have some other stuff to
Yes,
talk about. So
yes, that would be amazing. That would
definitely.
be amazing. I
Well,
appreciate you having me.
thanks, Kellie.
Thank you, Jeremy.